Hello, and welcome back to another conversation about graduate school. My name is Austin Schutz. I'm a graduate student at the University of Alabama. I'm a sixth-year PhD student in political science and a fifth-year MA student in women's studies. I'm taking the slow route till I graduate. And what I want to talk about today is, I think, something that does not get super emphasized in graduate school curriculum during normal times, but especially during the pandemic, and is probably needed more right now. And that's to have a conversation about time management. So today, that's what we're going to do. I have kind of 7 loose rules or loose pieces of advice that I have from my time in graduate school. And you see me glancing back and forth, and that's because I'm totally self-conscious about what's happening in the background of my office. I'm in the middle of trying to reorganize it, so it looks a mess. But I'm still going to do this anyways, so apologies. It'll be clean next time. I know no one really truly cares. So, 7 kind of tips about time management. So the first, I'm going to lead with the most important, and that's that work will always be here, but events in life pass. So what do I mean by this? I mean, frankly, it's pretty clear what I mean. But something that I have realized in graduate school is it's very easy to get caught up in your work because it feels and is incredibly important. But it also so happens that, if you take a break of a day or two, when you come back, the same work is still going to be there waiting for you. But a lot of things in life are one time only. And so that means that the thing that you should prioritize in every case are those things in life that you find incredibly important. Now, I think that this is especially obvious during right now. Not to get on a super sad note, but I am very happy that during graduate school and undergrad, I always made it a point to go back home during the summer before the pandemic, because I think what a lot of people experience is you have relatives that will not be around when you get done with graduate school. And so taking time to spend time with them, taking time to attend to the needs of romantic partners, family, children, all of those things is super important. And that doesn't mean that your work isn't important. That doesn't mean that sometimes your work will become a priority over things in life that you might want to do. Sure, I would really like to join a rec basketball league, but as of right now, I have both things in my personal life and in my professional life that are more important. But the key thing is that there are certain things that are so important that your work should not stop you from doing them. And your work will always be there. So take the break if you need it. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. She's so cute, but she's very upset that I'm recording this. So the second thing is that I'm going to pause and invite my dog to come spend time with me while I record this. Okay, I'm back. This is my dog in the background. There you go, sweetheart. Okay. Alright, so we have talked about the fact that work will always be there, but things in life will not be. So, number 2, you can make strict rules for boundaries in terms of how you're going to manage your time, but that's not always what works for people. So, I have seen many a conversation on Twitter about working on the weekend and sending emails on the weekend. And I think that those conversations a lot of times are kind of missing the point. And the reason I say that is this. What they're all trying to emphasize is that everybody needs time outside of work. Yes, even though we love academia, or most of us love academia, or some of us love academia, or all of us hate it but are still here, I don't know. But even though, at least hypothetically, we love academia, it is important to put boundaries around where work ends and where the rest of our life begins. And when that gets too muddy, life can get very stressful. And so if your rule is that you are not going to send, answer emails, or do any work on the weekend, I think that is a totally wonderful, legitimate rule if it works for you. But your rule might be different. For me, I do a weekly budget of hours. And that works better for me because I like to load up my work on Mondays and Tuesdays. This is when I get a lot of my administrative work done. And you're going to hear my dog chewing, which is super cute. This is when I get a lot of my administrative work done. This is when I get my reading for class done. And then I like to do less hours through the rest of the week. So I'm going to apologize if she ends up being super distracting, but this is the solution that we have to go for now. Okay. Oh no, it's bad. It's so bad. Okay, I'm going to pause and let her chew for a bit, and when it calms down, I will resume again. Okay, so it turns out her chewing is not going to get quieter. So what I'm going to hope is that my abilities in post-production are going to be able to compensate for this, but at the very least you get to see me amused by my dog, and hopefully that is endearing and not annoying. So work will always be there. Strict rules can be good for creating boundaries, but they're not for everyone. So I do an hourly budget, or a weekly budget of hours. I do 50 hours. You might do 40. I wouldn't recommend more than 50. I had a semester where I took 5 classes, I was working an additional job, and I was also teaching. And so that worked out to about 116 hours a week. And I say 116 hours because I really paid close attention to it. And that gets into another point, is that overwork can severely impact your health. So put your mind and body before your work. There's not really another way to put that. It is, there are all kinds of graduate students and academics who get unhealthy as a result of not having boundaries with their work. I am one of them. I have this experience. This is why I'm doing this video. During that year, I gained a very unhealthy 90 pounds. This is not to body shame. This is me saying that I gained weight to the point that I felt unhealthy, in pain, sick, all the time. And working to the point that you feel unhealthy, unsafe, sick, sad, depressed, all the time, to the point where, you elevate your stress levels to where, a reasonable approach to counseling can't ameliorate that, and changing habits can't really help that because you're just so completely overwhelmed. That's not healthy. And if that's not something that can be solved, I don't know why you would want to be doing this, to be quite frank. And this is not me saying that if you're stressed and overwhelmed, you shouldn't do grad school. This is not me saying, some people are cut out for it and some people aren't. I don't really think that's the case at all. What I think is that if you are in a place that doesn't respect you having healthy habits around work and life, it's not a good place for you to be. And if you don't have the kind of boundaries where you can set those limits that are, then in turn respected, then it might not be the time to be doing this, or these might be skills that you need to develop. Like, I developed them in graduate school. So be really conscientious about your health and don't let your work impact it. Okay. So we've gone through 3 points. Work will always be there. Life won't be. Strict rules can be good for creating boundaries, but they're not for everyone. Overwork can impact your health. So let's do another one. Sometimes low-tech solutions are better than high-tech solutions. And I mean that in this sense. Some people get really distracted when they go to do like a very, kind of simple task on the computer or on their cell phone. For me, it was a cell phone. So, okay, I don't have it with me right now. I don't use a smartphone anymore. I use a flip phone. There's a lot of reasons why I don't use a smartphone, but one of the big ones in terms of my productivity is I am so easily distracted on a smartphone. It is like way less severe on a computer for some reason, but with a smartphone, like, you're always connected. And part of that is like the work email, part of that's the social media, part of that's always having texts. Now I have this built-in excuse of like, well, I have to use T9 words. So to be honest, like, I have this text number on my computer and you can just text that and I'll get to it when I get to it. And I'm pretty responsive there. But, this could be something like, okay, if I try to log everything in Google Calendar, like, I end up just getting on Facebook. And so I'm actually going to have, a handwritten planner. Or this could be when I'm taking notes in class, if I do it on my computer, I end up browsing the web, or I end up missing what's being said in the course of conversation. And so instead I write important things down during class. There's a whole bunch of areas that this can be applicable to. And it's not true of everyone. For some people, like, all of the smart devices, all of the connectivity makes everything way easier. But you really have to think about the things that distract you and the things that don't. And for me, the biggest distraction I had that was not just taking away from my work, but taking away from my personal life was a smartphone. And so I don't have one, and I doubt that I'll ever have one again, even though it might at some point be necessary for the modern economy. But I will face that doomsday scenario when it comes. Okay, so sometimes low-tech solutions are better than high-tech solutions. The ability to say no is important. So graduate school, especially if you're doing a PhD program, there's so many projects that you can get roped into doing. And a lot of those projects will be really beneficial. But it's easy to say yes to absolutely everything. And I've been guilty of this. And at a certain point, you say yes to so many things that you can't possibly manage all that's on your plate. And when that happens, not only are you doing a disservice to yourself, but you're doing a disservice to potential collaborators. So when you think about taking on a new obligation, you have to think really seriously about it, and whether or not you have the time and the energy. So I'm going to give an example. In my first year of graduate school, there was not an LGBT organization for graduate students. There had been in the past, but at the time there wasn't. And so the next year we created one. And I was on the exec board of this organization for 4 years. I think we did some really great things. I'm really glad that it's here. I think that if it were here and I was an incoming graduate student, I would have had a lot better experience than, my first couple of years in graduate school as an openly gay person at the University of Alabama. Like, And not to make Alabama or the South sound terrible. They're not. I actually legitimately love it here. But it took some effort to find the kind of support that I needed, and that would have helped. That being said, there was a certain point at which I had become involved for so long that, one, it was counterproductive to the long-term health of the organization. Not because no one can do anything without me, but because if you continue to be the person in charge of something, I think it sets up this dynamic where others don't feel like they can step in and put their own stamp on something. And so I think for that reason, I probably honestly should have left earlier than I did. But I stayed on one more year because in the first year of the pandemic, we just couldn't find an executive board. So I kind of like helped it halfway survive through the pandemic. And now there's a new exec board and they're going to do great things with it. But so on the one hand, me not saying no could have possibly been detrimental to the organization, but also for myself. Like having that additional obligation when I was starting my dissertation was counterproductive to actually achieving my goal in graduate school. And this is not to say that you shouldn't engage in advocacy. This is not to say that you shouldn't take on non-academic obligations or that you shouldn't take on additional projects with other professors, graduate students, etc. But there is an opportunity cost to every single decision that you make. Don't belabor it. Don't belabor it. Don't freak out about it. Just when you feel like you need to say no and just be very honest. Like, I would love to work on this project, Dr. So-and-so, but I have a lot on my plate right now, and these projects are probably not going to clear out for another year and a half. So I don't think that I'm going to be able to work with you on this, but I hope that if you have something similar in the future, you'll reach out to me. Because it's very simple. No one's going to hear that and think, oh my goodness, Austin, terrible person, does not want to work with me. It's just not what's going to happen. They're going to say, oh, okay, I respect that. I have lots of projects too. Sometimes I have to say no, and this person knows what their limits are, and so they're going to be reliable to work with. Okay, so I've gone through 5 points. I have 2 more, so this, like everything, I guess it's going to be longer than I anticipated, but hopefully it's going to be helpful for people, because I feel like these are things that in my graduate career in 2 programs come out in conversations that you have among graduate students and faculty, but they aren't necessarily something that like you sit down and say, okay, for this week we're going to read like 2 readings on time management and work-life balance, and we're going to talk about it, and then next week we're going to read 2 readings on mental health in graduate school, and we're going to talk about it so that you know what things to expect while you're here. Some of that happens, but I think that it's important to actually have like a really robust conversation about this. And so I hope that I'm impressing upon people that are just starting their graduate school career that like the whole reason you are here, beyond the kind of work that you can do and the type of good that you can create in the world, is for you. It is for you to have a fulfilling life. Like, that is important too. You are worthy of that, and it is so easy to lose sight of it in graduate school and to sacrifice things that are incredibly important to you. Okay, so family often doesn't understand the demands of graduate school, but at the same time, we aren't responsive enough to family. This might be applicable to some of you, it might not be. Something I hear quite frequently and have said is like, okay, my family just really doesn't get how much time and effort and energy this takes and how exhausted I am. And that is just, I don't think, a super fair characterization. I think that it can be the case that your family doesn't quite understand the demands that you're under. And you might not be able to clarify that with them, or, to ever quite get to the point where, people aren't upset with you every now and then for not keeping in touch, etc. But other people are doing things that are really demanding too. And they just want to hear from you. And I am really not as good as I should be about keeping in touch with family. And it's something that I am definitely working on, especially this year. One of my goals has been this year, I want to be better with communicating with my family. But this is just something to keep in mind. Like, we're not in some special place that people can't get. We're in a place that some people might not understand the job or the time commitment or the distribution of the time. And when you say, okay, like, finals week is coming up in 2 weeks, so you might not hear from me during that time frame, and afterwards people are upset, like, why didn't you call me? Like, yeah, they don't get it. That sucks. And yes, everybody has different family dynamics, and perhaps I'm not really being fair to what your family dynamics are, and I'm not trying to claim that that's the case. I'm just trying to say that it is just as easy for us to misunderstand what our family's trying to tell us as it is for them to misunderstand what we're trying to tell them. And the same goes for friends too, etc., etc. Like, graduate school is hard. This time management thing is hard. This work-life balance thing is hard. Life is hard. All of it is stuff that needs to be managed with care and love and compassion. And I think, if you have those things in mind, things are hopefully going to turn out fine. Just don't lose sight of the fact that, like, this is not just our little bubble. We're not the only people that experience these things. Okay. Finally, we're on to the last thing. And this is probably perhaps the most, like, day-to-day practical thing that I've got. And I would encourage you, like, look up scheduling strategies, try and find what works for you. That's not really what this video is about. This video is about balancing your life and your work, and some practical things for thinking about that. So my last thing is, you might have certain times of the day that work best for you to work. And I think this relates back to the second thing that I talked about, that strict rules for creating boundaries can be helpful, especially when it comes to creating these time-based boundaries. But for some people, like, I work really good on a Sunday afternoon or evening. I work really good on a Saturday morning. And I kind of enjoy waking up on a Saturday a bit earlier than my partner and putting in a couple hours of work, and then we spend a day together, probably take the dog to the dog park. Like, so, try and figure out what works for you. And I talked about the fact that, like, front loading my schedule really works for me. That's why I'm recording this at like 10:15 at night. Like, this honestly is a time that works really well for my productivity schedule. And it might not for you. I'm totally not saying, like, yes, work your first 30 hours of work in the first 3 days of the week, and then you can kind of spread it out, a few hours at a time for the rest of the week. Like, that might not work for you. That's just what works for me. I anticipate part of it is, like, my professional background. I had worked as a drafter before this, and so a lot of times I worked 4/10s. Or I worked like 3 10s and then an 8 and a 6. And lo and behold, I still do really good when I have those big chunks of time at the beginning of the week. So I hope this has been helpful. Just real quick, I'm going to restate those points so that hopefully you leave with them really drilled in your head. So point 1, the work will always be there, life won't be. Rule 2, strict rules can be good for creating boundaries, but they're not for everyone. Rule 3, sometimes low-tech solutions are better than high-tech solutions. Rule 4, overwork impacts your health. Rule 5, the ability to say no is important. Rule 6, family often doesn't understand the demands of grad school, but at the same time, oftentimes we aren't responsive enough to family. And Rule 7, you may have certain times of day when you are most productive. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this gets you thinking. Not all of these things will be applicable to you, and I cannot emphasize that enough. So if you hear something and it doesn't resonate, if you're like, yo man, no, my family really does not understand me. Like I totally get that. I totally understand that family can be like that. And same caveat applies to a lot of these other things. So with all that being said, I will see you again next week or the week after. Just depends on what my schedule permits. And I think what we're going to talk about is money in graduate school. I won't tell you how to budget, but what I want to do is kind of go through what money looks like in graduate school, so that you kind of have like a realistic picture of what kind of financial outcome you're going to have the moment you step off campus. So thank you so much, and I will see you again soon.